of the skyscraper also begins in Chicago. And the first one of those I'll try to show you is now standing as the third tallest building in the city. You can see it from here if you look diagonally to the, well, it's right underneath of the sun right now, actually, so it might be a little hard to see. It's a tall gray rectangle of a building with vertical window columns racing up and down the sides over there, right behind that condo with the wavy balconies. That's now known as the Aon Center. Back in the early 70s, when that was finished, it was the tallest building in Chicago for a couple years, 89 feet. That includes that little spire you see sticking up off the top of the building there. The spire is what takes it to the full height, and that's been making it our second tallest for over 2 years now. Adrian Smith is the architect of the Trump Tower. He also designed the tallest building in the world right now. The Burj Khalifa building in Dubai is also one of his, as well as the NBC Tower, which you're going to see on the right side after the bridge next. Also by Adrian Smith. So quite a few buildings here in Chicago and all over the place, really. But that's what I'll tell you about next, the NBC Tower coming up on the right. More about the Trump as we get closer. And there's a better look at it. The NBC Tower from 1989 by Adrian Smith. Pretty much the same style as their 30 Rockefeller building in New York City for NBC. A throwback to the Art Deco style, popular in the mid-1920s and early 30s. Vertical lines race up the sides, gentle setbacks as you climb to the top, and those window plates accenting those windows are all some of the same elements you'll see on these older buildings later on out here. But now we've got two of Chicago's more famous landmark buildings coming up ahead of us here. Diagonally to the right ahead of us, a great look at the Wrigley Building, home to the great chewing gum empire. It's technically two buildings connected by bridges in between it. And that clock tower you see at the top is modeled from the Giralda Tower in Seville, Spain. More on that in a moment, because we've also got the Chicago Tribune Tower coming up on our right side, right after this building. Back in 1922, the Tribune newspaper held a competition to see who could design the most beautiful office building in the world. Out of 264 entries, that's first place standing right there by Raymond Hood and John Howes of New York. That design was inspired by the Butter Tower from the Rouen Cathedral in France, and they won $50,000 for that first prize design back in 1922. Hello. 3 setbacks on this tower are the heights of the buildings around it on this side of the river. First setback is equal to the rooftop of the Wrigley Building. The second one is the height of Marina City Towers peeking around the corner there. And the IBM building right next to it is the height of the third setback. So between the setbacks and that mirrored glass reflecting the city all around it, it tries to pay tribute to its surroundings in that fashion. Luxury condos on the top of it, fancy hotel underneath. $9 jar of gummy bears in the mini fridge. Now, arguably the most influential architect of the 20th century was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And Ludwig Mies van der Rohe gets credit for being the father of the modern style. The building directly on your right side here is his final American design from 1969, the IBM building. Mies van der Rohe's main philosophy was that less was more. For the first time in history, he stripped off all the fancy decorations and just left you with the bare essence of a building, glass and steel. And that would be the predominant style in architecture from the 1950s all the way to the 1980s, the modern style. Here's a direct reaction against the modern style right next door. These are Bertrand Goldberg's Marina City Towers. Lovingly nicknamed the Corncob Towers by many Chicagoans because of that design. Goldberg was a former student of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. But Goldberg thought that the square was a psychological slum and that the circle had power to draw people together. Thus the design of Marina City, meant to be a city within a city. Everything you ever wanted right in your own building complex. And one of the earliest river residences out here, finished back in the mid-1960s. the Merchandise Mart. Considered the biggest building in the world when it was finished in the early 1930s. Takes up 2 entire city blocks, and that's the authentic Art Deco style you're looking at here. Vertical lines up the sides, gentle setbacks at the top, the window plates. The big heads in front of it are the merchant princes of Chicago. Guys like Marshall Field, Montgomery Ward, a few Sears presidents. Very popular wedding bridge up here. I like to check out bridesmaid dresses to see what level of taste we're talking about here. We'll see in a moment. Anyway, the architect in charge of renovating that old cold storage warehouse into office and condo space, Harry Weiss, also designed these cottages. Hey, way to go! The Lake Street Bridge will be our gateway into there. We've been under plenty of bridges already today. Last time they counted them, Chicago still has 36 bridges that go up and down whenever they have to, and about 56 bridges in all. As a general rule, if the bridge is down like this one, that means it can go back up again. If you ever see a bridge that's already up, that means it's broke. Just as a general rule, so don't... And over time, it has been given the nickname of Insull's Throne. Insull was Samuel Insull. He put up all the money to have it built. And Throne, because it looks like a throne from the backside of it here. You'll see that better as we get behind it. There's lots of stories about why it is shaped like a throne. And the most popular story is that Samuel Insull's wife desperately wanted to be a famous opera singer, yet lacked talent. She was turned down by the operas of New York, so he had the throne built for her, with its back turned to New York City. Perhaps. It's either that or a combination of things, like a zoning ordinance from 1927 where they told you what height to put the setbacks at so you didn't block out too much sunlight. That gave these arms to the side of the throne. The office tower that makes up the back of it could not be built on top of the opera stage because there was no support underneath for it, so they had to set the tower back off of the stage area like that. And all those things may have led to the throne-like appearance too. Biggest post office in the world when it was finished in the early 30s. To accommodate a massive mail order industry here, they thought they needed a massive post office. It became obsolete due to its enormity within a city. A lot of the same ideas from Marina City, just down here on this end of the river. So it does stand out as something unique down here. Looking ahead again now. Straight ahead of us, and right in front of the Sears Tower, is a tall pink building with a very large light at the very top of it. That is 311 South Wacker Drive. Totally covered in pink granite from Texas. It's an octagon. But of course, the most striking feature would be the 70-foot tall glass drum filled with thousands of fluorescent lights. The Board of Trade was finished in 1929, the work of William Halliburton and John Root. And that was the tallest building in Chicago for nearly 40 years. The Silver Lady on the top is a statue of Ceres, the Roman goddess of grain, or the harvest. Just to show they do the agricultural futures trading inside of the Board of Trade building over there. Now right after the bridge, just to the right is the Jewelers building. You've got the dome at the very top of it there, and 4 towers on the corners that used to serve as water towers for the building. That dome up there became famous because Al Capone used to run a speakeasy called the Stratosphere just underneath of that dome on top of it. The thin tower of the building to the right here is Mather Tower. It had the distinction of being the tallest building in Chicago for about a week and a half in the late 1920s. It's covered in a Gothic-inspired terracotta, a kind of baked clay supposed to be fireproof, except for the very top section, which is a brighter white than the rest of the building. The new top up there is made out of aluminum. When it was clay, it was falling apart on a regular basis. So they made that new aluminum top, floated it down here on a barge.